For first-time entrepreneurs, it's the toughest because first-time entrepreneurs oftentimes don't recognize the signs that a pivot needs to be made and will stick with things too long. Or alternatively, which is the art of this, may think that they need to respond too quickly. I think the key thing is setting up a lot of experiments, setting hypotheses up, finding ways to testing them. If you have an internet business, you can sometimes actually test them to make changes in your website. If you don't have an internet type business and you have something that has a longer development cycle, do a lot of market research, set up experiments, A/B experiments where you can get real data. So the key really, I think, there is setting a hypothesis, creating a set of experiments, going forward with the experiments, analyzing the data in an objective manner, and doing it in a way that is based on real customer feedback, either through product or through really good market research. It's both, because you have to look at the analytics. If you can have objective data, that helps a lot. But a lot of times, if you think about Steve Jobs did not make his decisions based on a lot of analytics. He was making it based on gut and based on a true detailed understanding of what the customer would want if it only existed. And so in those situations, sometimes you just have to stick with it for a while. But even so there's still ways of testing to make sure that your product concept and your market is correct. And I think particularly on the market side, that's the easiest to test. When you're pivoting, there's really three ways you can pivot. You can pivot on the product, saying, gee, we don't have the right product here, we have the right market, we have the right team. You can pivot on the market, saying, gee, we have a good product, we have a good team, but we just didn't pick the right market, we didn't pick the right customer base, or maybe we're just early into an area and the area hasn't developed, isn't mature enough for our particular product. Or you can say, I've got the product right, I've got the customer right, but my team isn't correct. Usually in startups, more often than not, it's the customer and the market where you need to pivot on. Because if you pivot on the product, that's a huge restart for companies. That's almost like, let's just throw this out and we're going to try a whole nother technology. That can take years. Usually the founding team, the investors, it's very hard to change out. It sounds like an easy thing, but it's not. The easiest thing usually to pivot on is to try to find another application. And if you look at most of the companies that have been successful in pivoting, they usually pivot along the axis of the market and the customer, not so much on the axis of the technology and the team. There's a lot of aspects to that because there's a lot of people you have to bring along to make a pivot successful. You have to bring your investors along, you need to bring your board along, you need to bring your employees along. And companies that have done very good at it, first of all, they prepare ahead of time. They think about, gee, we're in a startup, we're not going to get everything right initially. We're going to have a lot of bumps on the road. They plan in terms of telling their investors is we need to raise enough money so we have time for experimentation, that if our first customer base doesn't work out, we have time to do the success. People tell their boards about that. They also tell their employees is you need to buy into the mission of the company, you need to buy into the overall vision. The specific implementation in terms of the customer, in terms of even the product, may change over time. So I think the most important thing is to prepare people ahead of time. And then when you make the change, I think the hardest part isn't so much changing direction strategically, it's really the people issues. And particularly, what do you do with people who may no longer fit with your business? Is if you've hired somebody who may be an expert in consumer packaged goods, and now our company's going to go focus on financial services, you need to find a way of repurposing those people, or to basically, if you need to let them go, is to do it in a way that doesn't send the signal to the rest of the organization that may happen to them as well. It's a very difficult issue to work through. The ones that people are familiar with now is Twitter is a very good example. Netflix is a very good example. Very different model than they have. You could even say Apple has been. Actually a GSB professor here performed a very successful pivot, Andy Radcliffe, with Wealthfront, which started off as Kaching, and they've now basically morphed that business into something doing personal wealth management, very different than the initial topic. The industry that I'm in is the biotech industry. And you don't think of biotech as an industry of pivot, very long science, long development time, but the most 80% of the companies that have been successful in our industry, the major successes, are successful in something very different than their original idea. Amgen, which is probably one of the largest biotech companies out there, originally did chicken growth hormone. Genentech, which has been the pioneer in the industry, started off doing industrial chemicals. And they recognized early on they had fabulous technology bases, but they were doing the wrong market application and pivoted. It's much harder in a technology company than it is necessarily an internet software company, just as important. Really at the early stage, it's how do I learn what my best market is, what my best application is, and really achieving product market fit. So if you set your objective in the first year or first year and a half as I want to learn where my best application is, how to tailor my product to that, all these things that you might call failure are really just learnings and actually are contributing to the intellectual success, intellectual base, and the eventual success of the company. And that's not failure at all, that's success.